Hello, kia ora, salam, namaste and greetings. Yes, it's me, back again, your host, Javed Khan, and this is the one, the only, Darpan the Mirror, a visual kaleidoscope of images capturing the vibrancy of the world around you. Now, what a crazy week it's been. Firstly, what's going on with everyone? People not working on a Monday? En masse? Gotcha! Easter was in full flight and your typical Kiwi family was out in full effect enjoying the generous rays that a somewhat surreal Auckland weather had to offer. Although not all of us were lucky enough to have the luxury of that, with a lot of local retailers running amok of the paper-thin laws surrounding the governance of trade during this busy period. Now, on the sporting front, which I just so love to fill your guys' lives with, no, I'm serious, the Black Caps keep charging forward to secure a 1-2 finish in the Super 8, and all indications are affirming that. However, there are a few ominous signs in the match against Ireland. Good luck to the boys anyhow. Now, league legend Andrew Johns has bowed out of the game due to repeated neck injuries. His deft touches with the ball will be sorely missed by all. And finally, teen swimming sensation Michael Phelps, the human fish of USA, literally tsunamied world records at the World Champs. Now, if I remember correctly, he collected 6 gold medals and smashed just as many world records on the way. Now, New Zealand's #1 swimmer, Moss Burmester, was also there, and he was just out of the medal hunt, but hopes to bolster his chances with the Chinese Olympics just around the corner by training with a US camp. Look out. Now, what do we have in the show for you today? Well, we are carrying an interview with US Consul General John Desrocher, who brings along with him years of experience in the wide variety of positions on the diplomatic front after having served in different parts of the world. And then, in the second half of Insight, we continue with the ever-popular, ever-enduring Kazana fashion show that was held at the Gandhi Centre. The glitz, the glamour, the saris. And finally, this will be topped off by Darpan's local news. So what better time than now to get the ball rolling? It's over to Shrishti Narayan speaking to US Consul General John Desrocher in Insight.
What role does the US Consul General advocate? What does John Desrocher promote? Quite profoundly, the mission of the United States Embassy is to advance the interests of the United States and to serve and protect US citizens in New Zealand. The ambassador is the personal representative of the President of the United States. As the chief advocate of US policy, he is supported by personnel from the Department of State and other US agencies. The Embassy reports and analyses developments in New Zealand of concern to the United States and advances a broad range of US policy initiatives. The Embassy promotes United States economic and commercial interests and the export of American agricultural and industrial products and services, and otherwise assists American business, workers and investors. The Embassy engages the government and a broad range of organisations and individuals in New Zealand to promote shared values. Among others, these include individual freedom, human rights and democracy and the rule of law. Consul General John Desrocher, who comes to the US Consulate General in Auckland from the US Embassy in Cairo, where he served as Counselor for Economic and Political Affairs. He has extensive experience in international trade and in Middle East issues. In addition to his Cairo assignment, he participated in Palestinian-Israeli economic negotiations while serving at the US Consulate General in Jerusalem and served as desk officer for Iraq in the mid-1990s. While serving at the office of the US Trade Representative, he led portions of the negotiations of US free trade agreements with Chile and Singapore. He has also served in the US embassies in Monrovia and Bonn, as well as in the State Department Operations Centre and Office of European Union Affairs. He is a multiple recipient of the State Department's Meritorious Honour Award. In the times where the US image is taking a heavy beating with respect to its warmongering attitude, futile invasion and occupation of Iraq based on white lies of weapons of mass deception and the subsequent failure to bring peace in Iraq and the general failure of the US foreign policy in the Middle East. Following the recent trip of our Prime Minister Helen Clark to US, the burning and thorny nuclear issue is off the radar, seemingly for the present, giving rise to good relations between the two countries. Free trade agreement did not come about, but the two nations have agreed to work around the problems and respect the changing times.
US Consul General John Desrocher, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
From economic negotiations to political, from economic trade to European and Middle Eastern affairs, you've had extensive work in various diplomatic positions. How do you feel about all the positions you've held?
Oh, it's I can't say I've had a job that I haven't enjoyed. The reason I got into this business was because it offers such a variety of things to do in so many parts of the world, which is something I've always wanted to do, and I've been doing it for, well, I won't say how many years, but a long time now, and it's been great. It really has.
Excellent. Sounds exciting. Now, John, you've won the State Department's Meritorious Honour Award several times. Could you please elaborate on this?
Oh, well, that's just an internal State Department award recognizing, performance. It could be in a wide variety of areas. Some of it had to do once with my work on peace process negotiations when I was serving in Jerusalem, and once way back in the very beginning of my career, I was in Liberia at the start of the Civil War there and helped evacuate a lot of American citizens during the war, that sort of thing, but for a wide variety of things.
Mm-hmm. And what motivated you to take the plunge into a diplomatic career?
Well, it's interesting. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, in a rural area in upstate New York, but we had the Winter Olympics there when I was a teenager in my hometown of Lake Placid, and I was 15 at the time, and it had a significant impact on me, coming from a town of literally just a few thousand people, where suddenly we had this influx of tens of thousands of people from all over the world, and I just thought it was absolutely fascinating, and that kind of, I guess, was really the spark. Mm-hmm. And then in my studies, I studied a lot of international relations, and that just reinforced it.
Mm-hmm. And John, can you explain to us the role of the US Consul General and his staff in Auckland?
Sure. We are part of Ambassador McCormick's country team in New Zealand. We're a branch of the embassy down in Wellington. Our particular role up here, I guess, is twofold. We provide consular services for all of New Zealand. And when I say consular services, that means visas, both for people who just want to visit the United States for a short business trip or for tourism. It means visas for people who are immigrating to the U.S. permanently. We also provide citizens to services to American citizens in New Zealand, if people get into an accident, if they lose their passport, that sort of thing. We also are sort of the embassy's branch office to New Zealand's largest city and its commercial center. And a lot of the work I do focuses on talking to business people around here and economic issues because of the role that Auckland plays.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just going back to your personal journey for a moment, can you describe a high point and a low point of your career?
Well, there's been a lot of high points. I'd hate to pick out just any one. I mean, in a lot of ways, even going way back to the beginning in Liberia, it was a terrible, terrible situation. And it was very tragic. And that was certainly, seeing all of that unfold was very, very sad. Whereas, the work we did to get Americans out of harm's way, was very rewarding to me, even though the overall situation was very difficult. But boy, it would be hard for me to pick out. Every place I've been has been fascinating in its own way.
Mm. Where does US-New Zealand trade, cultural, political links, where do they stand in terms of issues and opportunities? Well,
our relationship, the U.S.-New Zealand relationship, is extraordinarily close. I think because it's based on some real fundamental commonalities in the ways we look at the world and what's important to us in the world. democracy, economic development, protection of freedom and human rights, and because we come at things from very similar perspectives in that regard, we're able to work together in a lot of areas in the region, in the UN, in the World Trade Organization, and lots of places. But really, the common ground is so extensive, it keeps the relationship very close.
Mm-hmm. The United States has maintained a consular presence in New Zealand since 1838. The first consul was James Ready Clendon, based in the capital, which at the time was Russell in the Bay of Islands. How do you see this transition to where we are now?
Well, it's I was in Russell not long ago, and I made a point of tracking down where James Ready Clendon's house, which of course was also the first government house for New Zealand, and of course, as you know, the house is long gone. But he did have, I have to say, he did have a very nice view. I have a very nice view too, but not quite that nice. But I think that given how young New Zealand was at the time, and even how young my own country was at the time, and how that relationship has endured and strengthened so much in the intervening 150 years, just goes to show, how close we've become. I didn't realize until, just before I came out here to take up this posting, how far back the U.S. relationship goes, and that many of the first Westerners who ever set foot in Aotearoa were American whalers from New England, of all places, which is very close to where I grew up in the States, and it's remarkable how you find these ties halfway around the world.
Now, from a protectionist environment to the present climate of New Zealand farmers prospering without subsidies or protection, how do you view this?
Well, I think it's a credit. I mean, it's New Zealand's economy as a whole, the agricultural sector included. It's a very impressive accomplishment. There are some staff members from the U.S. Congress have come, particularly those with agricultural backgrounds, particularly to see how things are done here, and everyone always leaves very impressed.
Now, Helen Clark's visit to the United States couldn't secure a free trade agreement. What do you think are the barriers to achieving this?
I've worked on free trade agreements in previous jobs. We really base our decisions based on the economics of the relationship and the complexities of completing such agreements, and they are very complex. It's certainly not something that we rule out at all. It's something that we'd like to do when the time is right, but they require an incredible resource commitment to accomplish. We're involved in a lot of negotiations now already. We're working a lot with New Zealand and the WTO on a more global trade agreement, and it's a matter of just being able to commit the resources to what I know from my own personal experience is an extraordinarily intensive process.
Now, the US currently has a free trade agreement with Australia, but this excludes agricultural products. So do you think New Zealand, being predominantly dairy and agricultural oriented, could there be a potential for a free trade agreement that focuses on agricultural products?
I wouldn't want to predict what a free trade agreement might look like. I mean, you can't know until you sit down. Again, I've worked on a couple of these, and they're all different. I'm not, Frank, to be honest, an expert on the Australia agreement, and I wouldn't even, it would be foolish to try to sort of hypothesize now what an agreement might look like in the future.
Sure. Now, New Zealand is passionate about being GE-free, as it is with being nuclear-free. What do you have to say about your government's threats concerning GE-free, regarding the fact that New Zealand will face consequences if it's demanded to fully label US food products? Well,
I can't say that I'm a complete expert on GMOs. We don't like the idea of labeling products that are perfectly safe, and it's something we've always opposed, and I imagine we would continue to do so. I don't know if we've issued any threats to anybody, but GMOs have been used safely in U.S. agriculture for quite some time, and we don't see their use as harmful.
Mm-hmm. Now, in New Zealand, we have three different viewpoints emanating from the government with respect to Iraq. The Duty Minister, Jim Anderton, has spoken his thoughts. The Foreign Minister, Winston Peters, stated that US troops should stay put, and the Prime Minister, Helen Clark, has distanced herself from both of these viewpoints. Does this confuse you?
No, I mean, I am not in a position to tell New Zealand government ministers what views they should express on Iraq or anything else. We heard most recently from the Prime Minister on her views on this, and you know, that's fine. We always listen closely to the views of our friends.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there's any solution in sight for the Palestinians?
I am optimistic that a solution can be found. I spent a lot of time working on these issues in a previous assignment. It certainly is frustrating that agreements can't be reached faster, but a just and lasting peace is what we all seek in the region. I'm optimistic that there are a lot of people out there on all sides who want that as well and are willing to work towards it. And it's the kind of situation where you can't let the frustrations slow you down, and you just have to keep working at it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think NPT is discriminatory in its nature and unworkable where in the nuclear states they have not eliminated their weapons? Britain, for example, recently extended its nuclear fleet by another 30 years, and bossing around others, saying that you can't develop and master nuclear technology.
I guess all I can really say about that is we expect countries who sign agreements to live up to those agreements as we always endeavor to do. I'm not really enough of an expert to point to country X or country Y and give a lot of background, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm. Now, the US was complicitly quiet and did not see any threat of proliferation of nuclear weapons when Israel pursued it, and raises a hue and cry in the case of Iran, even though Iran maintains it's only pursuing this for energy sources. Do you have any views on this?
Well, I mean, I just think it's important to look at the threat, and if you look at those two countries, and if you look at Iran's energetic and ongoing, continuing sponsorship of terrorism throughout the region, I think any reasonable person could see that a nuclear-armed Iraq would be a dangerous thing for the region and for the wider world.
Mm-hmm. And finally, on the regional issues front, such as Pacific trade and aid, Fiji and US New Zealand work to counter the threats to regional stability, such as in East Timor and the Solomon Islands. Your thoughts on this? I mean,
we do work a lot with New Zealand in the region. We see eye to eye. 2007, you may have heard, we are sort of naming the year of the Pacific. We're trying to, from our side, take what we call a whole of government approach, which means sitting down together as a group with the Coast Guard, the Peace Corps, our assistance people, and so on, and looking together at the region with our friends in the region to help promote economic development and good governance and so on. And we've invited leaders of the region to Washington next month to put our heads together to look for ways to work on that together. So, I think President Bush made a point when the Prime Minister was recently in Washington to highlight how well the U.S. and New Zealand work together in this region.
In these issues, sure. And we're a very, very small nation on a global scale, but do you think that the world is increasingly becoming disillusioned by the one-sided or lopsided foreign policies of the US?
Well, I don't think they're one-sided or lopsided, so I can't say I've particularly noticed that in my experience, but I guess I kind of disagree with your premise right from the start, so it's kind of hard to respond.
So John, from an educational point of view, are there any things in particular that the US Consul General is working on at the moment?
Well, that's a priority of ours. I mentioned how we, one of our responsibilities in Auckland is the visa work, and that includes visas for students. Most New Zealanders don't need a visa to go to the United States, of course, but if you're going to study for a long period, you do have to have one. And we definitely want to boost the number of young New Zealanders who go to the U.S. to study. Quite a few do, but not as many as we would like. And we found that in talking to those who do go and asking them why, their friends and classmates may be choosing to go somewhere else, we hear a lot of misconceptions about, it's being hard to get a visa, hard to get into the States, hard to get into universities, or not even so much hard to get into universities, but hard to find the information you need to make decisions. So we're trying to reach out to the universities, to the international affairs offices, and explain things as best we can and sort of clear some of the fog and lessen a lot of the confusion that a lot of people seem to have. There are fears about paperwork and processes that seem to intimidate people, and that's something we're trying to break down, because we've got a lot of great schools in the States, and the New Zealanders that I've spoke to who have studied there always come back raving about how wonderful the experience was, and we want more people to have that experience.
And so for New Zealanders who are interested in finding out more about studying in the US, what would be the best way for them to find out more information? Can they go to your website? You
can go to our website and find out about the visa part of it. U.S. universities are very interested in foreign students coming over, and their websites generally will provide a lot of information on how to go about it. People are welcome to get in touch with us if there's something they're confused about, because it's, even if you're in the U.S. as an American, the university application process can be an intimidating one, and we want to kind of lessen that as much as we can.
And that brings us to the end of our questions. So
well, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
No, I'm very happy to be here.